What's up, y'all? My name is Dan. So here I'm talking about Air Canada's transatlantic flights, including the routes flown by the airline to the other side of the Atlantic to Europe, Asia, and Africa, followed by the aircraft that are going to be used on these flights, followed by some interesting flights and cultural agreements that Air Canada has on the transatlantic market, and Air Canada's future plans. Air Canada, the largest airline and flag carrier of Canada, flies around 55 transatlantic routes from Canada to 33 destinations in Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and India. Although this might not be up to date because some of these routes have been suspended because of the Rona and have not yet resumed. Most of Air Canada's transatlantic operations fly out of Toronto Pearson International Airport, the airline's main hub, with 27 routes, most of them in Europe, but also a few odd destinations like Dubai or Doha. There's quite a bit of local demand into Toronto considering it's the main financial hub in Canada. But Air Canada also offers connections from airports all over Canada and in the US, including several smaller cities. Connections are very convenient at Toronto, given it offers better connections than many other airports in the US, such as JFK or Newark that are already very congested, or airports like Philadelphia or Washington that don't offer nearly as many connections. I'm guessing connections are also possible at Pearson from airports in Mexico, Colombia, and probably other places. The secondary transatlantic hub is Montreal, with 20 transatlantic routes and destinations all over Europe, especially in France and other French speaking parts of Europe, as well as a couple of destinations in Africa, such as Algiers, Cairo, or Casablanca. This airport similarly has a lot of local demand and offers connections from places all over Canada, including destinations that have no Toronto flights, mainly in Quebec, but also flights from the US, Mexico, and other places that can easily connect onto transatlantic flights. I guess it can also work as an alternate connecting hub to Toronto. Then there's Vancouver, with 4 routes, all of them being seasonal except the route to London Heathrow. This is the largest hub in the Canadian West Coast, and even though it's mostly used as a trans-Pacific hub, it's also very useful for connections into Europe from both the Canadian and US West Coast, especially those connections that have no flights to Toronto or Montreal. And then there's Calgary, which doesn't have nearly as much demand as the other hubs, but also faces more competition thanks to it being WestJet's main hub. But it does have 2 year-round flights to Frankfurt and London Heathrow and also offers connections mainly in Western Canada. Lastly, there's Ottawa and Halifax, which often flies to London Heathrow, largely dependent on local demand and operated by smaller aircraft. But I'm sure there are also plenty of connections possible from these two airports, even if they're not always the most convenient. But since they're operated by smaller aircraft like the 737 MAX 8, the operational cost must also be lower. The aircraft that Air Canada will be using as of August 2022 on transatlantic flights are the following. Do keep in mind that some of these might not be the most accurate and I might have missed a couple of flights. The Boeing 737 MAX 8 will be flown on shorter routes with lower demand, including Halifax to London Heathrow, as well as Toronto and Montreal to Reykjavik. The Airbus A330-300 would be used for routes from Montreal and Toronto, mainly into places with lower demand in Western Europe, including a lot of routes formerly flown by the 767-300ER. Some routes include Montreal to Lyon, Algiers, Nice, Lisbon, as well as Toronto to Barcelona, Madrid, Lisbon, and Manchester. The Boeing 787-8 would be used on some lower demand routes like Toronto to Edinburgh or Montreal to Casablanca and Vancouver to Zurich, as well as Toronto and Montreal to London. The Boeing 787-9 would be used for some of their average routes from all of Air Canada's hubs. They're not so busy, but not so smaller routes. And if it's a very busy route like Toronto to Delhi or Vancouver to London, then it's a double 787-9. The Boeing 777-200LR won't be nearly as heavily used on transatlantic flights, but a few flights will be flown on this, such as Toronto to Dublin and Frankfurt, as well as Calgary to Frankfurt. The 777-300ER will be used on some of the busiest routes, it seems, including 2 flights from Montreal to Paris, as well as from Toronto to London, among other smaller ones daily routes such as Athens, Brussels, and Rome, and Vancouver to Frankfurt. Air Canada's main transatlantic market is obviously London, with flights from 5 Canadian cities as of 2022. Flights to Halifax are going to get resumed this year, while flights from Ottawa and St. John's have yet to resume. And then there's Frankfurt, Lufthansa's hub, where Air Canada flies to from Air Canada's 4 main hubs, and passengers can connect onto Lufthansa's flights to other destinations all over Europe, Africa, and beyond, thanks to the transatlantic joint venture that the airlines have. Connections are also possible via Munich as an alternative to Frankfurt. Other airlines that are part of the Lufthansa group also offer connections into places that Lufthansa doesn't fly to, or as an alternative to Lufthansa's main hubs. These airlines include Brussels Airlines, Swiss, and Austrian Airlines. Air Canada flies to their hubs in Brussels, Geneva, Zurich, and Vienna. Other big markets for the airline are France and other French speaking parts of Europe, with several flights, mainly out of French speaking Montreal, which offers flights to Paris, Brussels, Geneva, Lyon, and Nice. Although in the past there were more destinations when Air Canada Rouge had the 767-300ER. Meanwhile, Toronto had flights to Paris and Brussels, but to a lesser extent than Montreal. Another market that is very important for the airline is Ireland, with Air Canada's flights to Dublin, as well as their codeshare agreements that they have with Aer Lingus that offers connections all over Western Europe and the British Isles. Air Canada and Air India have several direct flights from Toronto to Delhi and Mumbai, as well as Montreal to Delhi. There is also the possibility of Air India passengers to connect with Air Canada's flights at European airports such as London. Athens is also very important with Air Canada's partnership with Asian Airlines that connects passengers to nearby tourist destinations. This is a seasonal market, but it's a very popular one that Air Canada flies to on the largest aircraft. Not too far from there is Turkish hub at Istanbul that offers connections mainly to Central Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, especially routes that have very limited service. TAP Air Portugal, LOT Polish Airlines, Scandinavian Airlines offer connections on their respective areas in Western, Eastern, and Northern Europe as well. Ethiopian Airlines flies between Addis Ababa and Toronto via Dublin and non-stop on the way back, connecting Canada to smaller destinations all over Africa. Etihad is another airline that co-shares with Air Canada since Air Canada doesn't fly to Abu Dhabi. Etihad does fly to Toronto, where Etihad passengers can connect onto several Canadian destinations. Italy and Spain are also very important markets for the airline, which operates several routes to the two countries. A few of them are seasonal, such as Barcelona and Venice. There are some really interesting transatlantic routes that Air Canada operates, some of them thanks to codeshare agreements that the airlines from these countries have with Air Canada. Two of these are the flights between Canada and Egypt. These include Egypt Air's flight from Cairo to Toronto, with plenty of connections on both ends, but also Air Canada's seasonal flights between Montreal and Cairo. Egypt Air probably didn't get approval to fly into Montreal, but they also probably don't have enough planes to fly efficiently to Montreal. So Air Canada steps in during the summer season to fly to Cairo, providing connections that are possible from Montreal. Air Canada also flies to Doha, Qatar. In this case, Air Canada does have a codeshare agreement with Qatar Airways, despite being in the One World Alliance. But this is quite a good partnership, especially since Qatar has been having trouble heading flights to Canada. Probably due to restrictions, but also because of Qatar not having enough planes to fly all the routes that they want to operate. The codeshare agreement makes things easier by connecting passengers at Doha to fly further into places like India or Central Asia. Air Canada also flies to Dubai, a place dominated by Emirates. Air Canada doesn't have a codeshare agreement with Emirates, making things even more interesting. My guess is that since Emirates can't seem to get any more slots into Toronto and other Canadian airports other than their daily flight to Toronto, Air Canada took the opportunity to serve local demand into Dubai by flying there from Toronto, especially since there's a large Canadian population in the UAE, but also because Air Canada has a lot of connecting opportunities from passengers flying to Dubai from Canadian cities and US destinations that don't have any direct flights to Dubai. Other interesting flights that Air Canada operates include flights to smaller cities that don't really have many flights to the US, including Algiers and Casablanca from Montreal, as well as Bucharest and Budapest from Toronto. These flights are seasonal and are probably driven by immigrants from these countries going to visit their families and tourists who want to visit these countries. When it comes to the future of the airline, Air Canada has yet to resume several of the routes that were impacted by the pandemic, although that would probably take some time as restrictions are lifted and as Air Canada gets even more planes, especially after retiring their 767. All of this will probably be made easier thanks to Air Canada's Airbus A321XLR orders that Air Canada would probably use on smaller routes with lower demand, such as those formerly flown by the Boeing 767. These include flights from Montreal to smaller cities in France, as well as other destinations from Montreal that aren't as popular from there as they are from Toronto. The same could probably apply for flights to Toronto to smaller European cities that don't have any flights to Canada, as well as flights to cities that are bigger from Montreal than Toronto. Other possibilities are for smaller Canadian cities like Ottawa to Frankfurt, or Quebec to Paris, or Halifax to Frankfurt. And similar to what American Airlines plans to do, Air Canada could use the plane to turn some seasonal flights into year-round flights. But I might eventually do a more specific video talking about the Airbus A321 XLR with Air Canada. It's going to be interesting to see what Air Canada comes up with in the future of transatlantic flights. In the meanwhile, Air Canada is still set to dominate the market between Canada and the other side of the Atlantic. Thanks for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If y'all got any feedback, questions, or any comments, y'all can leave a comment. That's all I got to say, and I'll see y'all later.